Welcome to Business AI Today, the show where money-minded humans do deep and continuous learning. I am your host, Randall Scott White. Today's hot topic, artificial intelligence and mergers and acquisitions. Modern M&A attorneys are using or expect to use artificial intelligence and machine learning in their trade through this current wave of digital transformation. Very excited to welcome our guest expert, Martin Medeiros. Martin is an attorney, author, and public speaker. He's closed thousands of transactions over the last 25 years. He's worked on the legal and M&A teams of some of the world's largest software, transportation, and financial companies. He developed the negotiation curriculum at Lewis and Clark College of Entrepreneurship, and he hosts the Persuasion Lab, which discusses how humans and they're influenced and how effective they can be in the technocracy. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about what you're doing here in the field of AI and just getting the word out. And yeah, it's my honor.
So 90% of legal departments are foreseeing workloads increase in the next 2 years, and the deal value of mergers and acquisitions has an all-time high with a global value of $2.51 trillion. What are the top emerging AI trends that M&A attorneys need to catch up with or get ahead of?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And believe it or not, in the transactional space of AI, research and simulations were actually done about 20 years ago. There was a joint venture with University of Michigan and IBM whereby they tried simply if they could use AI to consummate a contract, and not to get too granular, but contract as offer, acceptance, consideration. And their algorithm in this thing had step one for that offer, acceptance, consideration diatribe or rubric that attorneys use is one, discovery. You have to figure out if there's a party that's a likely target or partner for you to do a transaction with. Second,
it's like pre-AI.
Right.
Diligence.
So exactly. So secondly, you need someone to have a willingness to go into setting terms and actually negotiating terms. And secondly, you have execution. What constitutes consummation of that deal? And in these three major modules of this algorithm, they worked it out, and they actually used the internet to find people for a simple transaction. And it worked. They had some data come back where they could find ready, willing, and able qualified buyers and actually close transactions. Now,
how long ago was that?
That was in 1980.
Wow, okay.
So
more way.
Very laboratory, very non-dynamic. But now we have 20 years worth of research, and well, if I'm looking for a partner, what's the information I need, or how do I qualify the buyer, or what are terms that they may not know that are making them almost get ready to look at a strategic partnership before they even know it. Forecasting, macroeconomic data, changes in supply chains. All this is very relevant today. And these are more variables that maybe the algorithms they have work and maybe they don't. And as a practical matter, we're used to automated transactions and have been for years, and we've taken people largely out of it. One is an obvious thing, which are bank clearing transactions. Those are negotiations online. They're fully automated. We don't even think about them. There's a lot of predetermined decisions in those algorithms, the way those deals are consummated, and problems happen.
Is there any kind of tool that is making the automation easier for you right now, like that goes out and you have, let's say, a particular vertical and you want to consider the top 10 M&A targets for a particular client, where you could just presto magico, press a button and it goes out, and the AI algorithm scours all the public information about various companies and comes back with the top 5 list that you might
Right.
want to consider based on all these variables.
Yeah, I that would be great, and it would greatly reduce expenses. There are a few
There's a market
emerging.
opportunity right there. Go for it.
Yeah, there are a few emerging technologies. You can get, if they're publicly traded, you can pull all that data, of course, off of the public filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So you can get a lot of public data that way. More of the strategic forecasting data. There's not a lot of people out there, but that space is hot in fintech right now. And I think if you look at a lot of the forecasting companies that are using AI, that will greatly reduce risk and losses that people or companies get together and they go after long due diligence cycles, and they lose a lot of time and resource on vetting things that maybe could be automated. Right now, a lot of that is done manually. In fact, when a client is looking for an exit, maybe we'll look at the investment banker community and see if we can get some data on typical terms for that industry vertical. For example, if it's an IT play, there are certain terms in the contract that are standard. And what I do is try to get data on what is a typical earnout, if any, in this industry. And if they're asking for a longer earnout, of course, and I'm representing the seller, that's generally not favorable. So I will go to something that's more of a market, earnout. Is that 6 months? Is that a year? Rather than they want a long earnout, of course, if you're the acquirer, to kind of hedge your bet and see if things will solidify before you commit all your resources to the
So
acquisition.
if that did exist, like you're saying right now, it would save a lot of money, but that also eats into billable hours. So recent research from Information Age shows that majority of employees in legal areas don't feel their job is quite under threat as much as the possible benefits that AI could provide, such as increased efficiencies and such. So do you think, what's your pulse? Is it more of a threat of, cutting off the legal services you can offer and charge for as these emerging technologies continue to automate what you and your human role do?
I think it's just making better decisions, and I'll never forget what a senior attorney told me in my days when I worked for a large AmLaw 100, a large AmLaw 100 law firm, and he said, "Good attorneys always put themselves out of business." In other words, if you grow a company from 0 to X, probably another firm may take it from X to Y, just like a venture capitalist, right? You have a seed round, they may be able to get you that initial seed round to a point X, and then their utility is gone, and it may be some of the founders may take less of a central role, and there may be another team to get them from X to Y, and then Y to Z, which may be a public market or some type of strategic relationship. Now, that happens by choice and by competency. So you want to know what you know, and your counsel should know what they know and what they don't know, and who the successor should be. But there are so many decisions now that are very strategic, that require some experience, some methodology, and this is math. We have to look at transactions and economics more than just a haggler's game, right? Negotiating. There's a lot of predetermined methodologies, Monte Carlo stuff, game theory, and it depends on what type of game you are in. And if you know what the game is, then you can run numbers and scenarios and see how to optimize the outcome. And game theory is something I try to teach and try to inform people. And the underlying data for that is available. So if you have a data set, for example, if I'm in a dispute, a lot of that data is available on, what the dispute is, who will win the dispute, plaintiff or defendant, what's the cause of actions, likely damages, for what side. So this is all in the Department of Justice reports this data, and you can get this data and kind of predetermine a lot of what you do. And a lot of the analytics part of my practice is basically, I think, becoming standard. Knowing a lot of people went to law school to escape math. I'm not sure that's the current trend.
Inescapable. I did marketing.
For example, once you have a data set and can actually do some forecasting and maybe different forecasting for different dependencies required on that product or that service, and if you can accurately predict those dependencies on that acquisition, then you're going to avoid some losses. On the upside, on the strategic side, what critical mass does that potential target have, or partner that you want to have them, say, acquire your assets? What do they potentially have to offer strategically? And that's really when we get into game theory. And just, I'm not going to get into the math, but you can think of game theory as, most basic form is zero-sum game. I win, you lose. This is a very old mercantilist type model. Colonial economies were built that way. Then you have this type of game called prisoner's dilemma, when you may benefit by cooperating and you may benefit by going it alone. That's a very important game for different people who are entering the market, thinking about, I want an exit, I want to be acquired by someone. And one of the third games that's probably most relevant is in the merger context is what they call the stag's hunt, which is I can get a certain amount of benefit if I go it alone, and I'm almost assured to get a certain amount. But if I join forces, I can exponentially get something. And it really is the synergy model. And the name of that game is a stag's hunt. You can run through scenarios and run through strategic options on where you're going, and those options drive the contractual terms that you'll actually negotiate. And once you have that strategic vision, statistically, all the research says you're much more likely to get your needs met, whatever they are, in that transaction.
Do you anticipate in which of those three game theory models would a black swan event like the once in a decade event that's happening with coronavirus, locking up supply chains around the world, the effects and the ripples and impacts are going to make a zero-sum game happen where there are winners and losers? So I would imagine with the losers, there are M&A acquisition targets right now. So with forecasting, how does an M&A attorney who's probably going to get a wave of new business from this put in artificial intelligence kind of forecasting into those plays?
Believe it or not, it's already, the companies who knew about it already have covered their position, and probably around 3 years ago. And it wasn't coronavirus, believe it or not, it was the threat of tariffs. So I do negotiation workshops and stuff. I go into these companies, and one had operations fab in a lot in China, and the minute the T word was used, the tariff word, they started shifting production to different countries. Vietnam, Malaysia, what have you, the Philippines, to make sure that if that supply chain was disrupted, where 25% would definitely skew the economics, that would change the dynamic. So basically, these are like trade routes that are well worn without tariffs. Well, what happens if there's a landslide? You can't make it through that mountain pass. You got to go somewhere else. And that's what people who said, okay, let's look at my scenarios strategically. Let's see what if this really happens. I'm going to hedge my bet and avoid some losses. And that's what they're doing. And there's some companies that really work on the policy level, like Apple. And we heard today in the front page of the Wall Street Journal how coronavirus has impacted Apple's ability to get product out. And of course,
Yeah.
if they can't get product out, they can't have revenue. So that's kind of a leading indicator of that. But the companies that were able to move and who didn't have the policy diplomatic girth to have a say at the diplomatic negotiation table, those companies have long, that are still in business, have long looked at scenarios, done a little of the Monte Carlo stuff, and shifted their operations to start pounding a new trade route, a new trail that's less risky than having everything in one nation.
So just supply chain management basics of having a middle inventory so that you can have that stock in case there is a drawdown on what you currently have in your inventory, as you can't create more of that. You would have thought that at the tariff moment that folks with businesses in China would have started moving that way and been able to throw that ball to whatever landing spot their next
Right.
place was, but they are getting impacted by it right now. So how is the current factor of the coronavirus, and that we don't know how long that is going to impact or exactly what those ripples are, how is that working into your daily routine for the companies you're working with right now? And do you have any AI that you're running on your own from available free AI libraries to assist you with this automation and to plug in these new variables? Or would that be something you are looking for the market to deliver, where you don't have to go and be a data scientist yourself and try to cobble together these Franken systems of forecasting and such?
Yeah, what I can do as a firm is limited. So if I could get a data aggregator, someone who has maybe millions, billions of points of data to run an AI on again, if I'm in manufacturing space, doing a component level forecast is essential, because if I say need a rare earth and I'm in business with Nation One, and I know what those prices look like, and if there's a variable that's going to skew that price, say increase that resource by 25% or 12% or what have you, if I were to switch over to another source, then my forecast will be much more accurate, and I can actually outthink the market if I have that component level forecasting on my thing. And I know there are some people who are doing that space, some new companies who are doing that, and I think that that's the future. I don't think
Me too.
yeah. I don't think haggling your deal, hoping and relying on diplomacy alone. You're going to have to rely on math and
I mean,
AI.
the fact is, you can look at the historical consensus of what market prediction experts in any given vertical or space is, and the average is wildly off the mark for any procurement officer, 20-30% error rates.
Yep.
And AI now is within 3 to 10%. I mean, it takes the human bias out of it, and that's what you mean by the future, right? Like the human element, outliers,
Yep.
data entry errors, those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and you look at some of these AI algorithms that are running now, they're running not at error rates like that, which is almost like more of a gamble. They're running at error rates at 1-5%, that's within a standard deviation.
Right.
Humans can't do that. I can't hire an investment banker and have that type of reliability, because humans cannot process that data fast enough, and they can't adjust the algorithm for the anomalies that happen. Coronavirus, tariffs, a tariff that goes on and off again, by
Limited
tweet.
cognitive ability to process so many data points at once and then have actionable intelligence from it.
Right. So a lot of these new fintech companies, if you are looking for a strategic expansion, you've got to start calling these companies up and subscribing and figuring out what they're doing right. How do you get within a standard deviation in a forecast?
Right.
It's not a human, and it's machine learning. It's AI.
Is there any other prediction, a human prediction that you would like to throw into the mix before we wrap up with the show here today? I wish we could keep going on this. It's fascinating, but I want to give you a chance to roll some dice, and we'll come back in another 5 years and see how close you were.
Well, Randy, you know me well, because I love making predictions because there's absolutely no accountability. What I think is, people are worried about coronavirus, worldwide recession, blah, blah, blah. I don't think 2020 is going to be a recessionary year. I think we're going to see a lot of transactions in the next 11 months. I think probably mid 2021, you're going to see a little bit of a slowdown, because I think that there are a few things that uncharted territory. And I don't think, I think coronavirus is hitting certain companies harder than others, but a lot of people have already baked a lot into their price and their strategy. So when you think about it, there's, and I'm not a immunologist, but you look at the level of sophistication. People talk about, oh, this is a 17 Spanish flu,
Right.
which it was actually started in a barracks in Kansas, I was told by a historian, because it was pre-World War II, a lot of people in one room. The medical efficacy we have now is a lot better than it was back then. But that doesn't mean that pandemic doesn't happen or will happen. I'm less concerned about the apocalyptic thing. I think it's a problem. I think it'll continue to be a problem as the population increases, but a lot of this, I think, is baked into the formula, unless something totally wild happens that I'm not smart enough to guess. But my prediction is steady course.
I think steady course too. I would have to agree with you. I'm a big believer in the market and humanity, and you just open it up for the way AI is making medical advances more efficient. I mean, look at the use of augmented reality when you have a surgeon who can see the actual thing he's working on with a heads-up display, and that heads-up display says they need to go between 3 different alternative vendors for pharma for that particular medicine. Is it in stock? I mean, when we get to such big data and the automation of everything getting down with Moore's law, 5 years from now, I mean, there will really be Doogie Housers. So I would have to agree with you. I can't wait to look at what we are, where we're at happily, because I believe in optimism and always appreciate our conversations. Martin Medeiros, thank you for joining us today on Business AI Today.
Thank you, Randy. It's my pleasure, and great job. Love the show. Love your content. Thank you.